I didn't say stop when he leaned in. That's the part that keeps replaying in my head. Not what he did, not the way the air between us suddenly felt electric, but the quiet moment right before. The second where I could have turned away. And didn't. The room was warm with that soft golden light from the floor lamp in the corner. Rain tapped lazily against the window behind him, steady and slow, like the night had nowhere else to be. My coffee had gone cold on the table beside me, a thin fog still clinging to the rim of the mug. He noticed before I did. "You're not drinking it," he said quietly. His voice had that calm weight to it, the kind that makes you listen even when the words themselves are simple. "I forgot," I replied, wrapping both hands around the cup anyway. The ceramic felt cooler than it should have. He smiled a little at that. Not teasing. Just noticing. We were sitting closer than we probably should have been. The couch was wide enough for distance, but somehow the space between us had slowly disappeared over the last hour. First it was the way our knees angled toward each other. Then the way his arm rested along the back of the couch, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of it. Close enough that every small shift in his posture made my heartbeat stumble. Outside, a car passed through the wet street, tires whispering against the pavement. The sound faded quickly, leaving the room wrapped in quiet again. He looked at me then. Not casually. Not the kind of glance people give when they're just listening to conversation. It was slower than that. Intentional. His eyes moved across my face like he was memorizing something he might not be allowed to see again. I felt it immediately, that strange tightening in my chest like my body had suddenly remembered gravity. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked. I tried to sound light, almost joking, but my fingers tightened slightly around the mug. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back just enough to study me more openly. The couch cushion shifted under his weight, and the subtle movement sent a small wave through the fabric beneath my hand. Then he said something that made the air in the room feel thinner. "Because you're pretending you don't feel this." My breath caught before I could stop it. "Feel what?" I asked, but the question came out softer than I intended. He tilted his head slightly, watching me like someone listening to a song they already know the ending to. "This," he said, and then he leaned forward a little. Not enough to touch me. Not enough to make it obvious. Just enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath brush the side of my face. My heart reacted instantly, one sharp beat, then another faster. I should have moved. Anyone would have moved. I had 100 excuses ready in my head. I could have stood up. I could have laughed it off. I could have turned the moment into something harmless. Instead, my body stayed exactly where it was. My eyes dropped to his mouth for a split second before I caught myself. He noticed. Of course he did. His voice came quieter now, almost thoughtful. "You see," he murmured. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping faster against the glass. Inside the room, everything felt suspended, like the entire night had narrowed down to the few inches between us. And then he moved just a little closer. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just close enough that I felt the warmth of him, the quiet gravity of a moment that had already gone too far. And that's when I realized something terrifying. I hadn't told him to stop. Not once. That's the strange thing about dangerous moments. They don't arrive with alarms. They arrive quietly, disguised as silence. His face was close enough now that I could see the faint crease near the corner of his eye, the one that appeared whenever he smiled. But he wasn't smiling anymore. He was studying me. Carefully. My fingers slowly loosened around the coffee mug, and I set it down on the table beside me. The small ceramic click sounded louder than it should have in the quiet room. Neither of us looked away. "You're doing it again," he said softly. "Doing what?" His gaze dropped briefly to my hands resting on my knees. "Pretending this is normal." The rain outside thickened, streaking the window with long silver lines. A gust of wind pushed against the glass, and the faint rattle filled the space between us. I let out a slow breath. "This is normal," I said. But the words didn't feel convincing even to me. He shifted slightly closer. Not dramatically. Just enough that his knee brushed mine. The contact was light, accidental almost, but the reaction inside me was immediate. My body went still. He noticed that too. His voice lowered. "See." I looked down at where our knees touched, then back up at him. You're reading into things, I said. He didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back slightly, resting his arm along the top of the couch again. His fingers relaxed against the fabric just behind my shoulder. Not touching, but close. Too close. You're right, he said after a moment. That surprised me. I blinked. I am. Probably. His eyes drifted toward the rain-streaked window for a second before returning to me. But if I'm wrong, he added quietly, you'd probably move away. I didn't. My body stayed exactly where it was, my knee still resting lightly against his. The space between our faces felt smaller now, even though neither of us had technically moved. He watched me realize it. Still here, he murmured. I swallowed. You're impossible. That made him smile a little. Not victorious. Just patient. Like he knew something I hadn't admitted yet. Another car passed outside, headlights briefly flashing through the curtains before disappearing down the street. For a moment neither of us spoke. The room filled with small details instead. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the quiet hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the slow rhythm of rain. Then he did something that made my breath catch. His hand shifted on the back of the couch. Not forward, just down slightly. His fingers brushed the edge of my shoulder. Barely. The touch was so light it could have been accidental. But it wasn't. I felt the warmth of it through the thin fabric of my shirt. My skin reacted instantly. A small shiver running down my arm before I could stop it. His voice softened when he noticed. There it is. I turned my head toward him. You're enjoying this too much. I'm observing, he said calmly. My heart was beating harder now. Not wildly, but enough that I could feel the pulse in my throat. Observing what? I asked. He looked at me again in that slow, deliberate way. Your honesty. I let out a quiet laugh. I'm not saying anything. Exactly. His hand remained resting lightly against my shoulder now, no longer pretending to be accidental. The warmth of it spread slowly through my chest. You could stop this anytime, he said. The words hung in the air between us. Not a challenge. Not pressure. Just truth. My mind immediately reached for logic. For reasons. For boundaries. But my body didn't move. Not an inch. His eyes flickered down to my lips for the briefest moment before returning to my gaze. The shift was subtle, but impossible to miss. The air between us tightened, and then he leaned forward again. Closer than before. Still not touching. Just close enough that my breath changed without permission. And in that exact moment, I realized the dangerous part wasn't what he was doing. It was the quiet fact that I was letting him. The strange thing about moments like that is how quiet they are. Nothing dramatic happened in the room. The rain kept tapping against the window. The lamp beside the couch still cast the same warm circle of light across the carpet. And yet somehow the entire atmosphere had shifted. He was closer now. Not by much. Just enough that if either of us moved an inch forward, the distance between our faces would disappear completely. My breathing had slowed, but my heartbeat hadn't. I could feel it low in my chest, steady but heavy. Like every pulse was reminding me that I should probably stand up, or say something, or laugh. Anything. Instead I stayed exactly where I was. His hand was still resting lightly on my shoulder. The warmth of it had settled there, spreading slowly through my skin like something my body had already accepted. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then he asked quietly, "Are you going to pretend you don't notice this too?" His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it now, not pressure, not arrogance. Something more careful than that. I exhaled slowly and leaned my head back against the couch. "Notice what?" I said. It sounded like a weak defense even to my own ears. He gave a soft, almost amused breath. "This." His thumb moved slightly against my shoulder. Not a stroke. Not a deliberate gesture. Just a small shift, but the movement sent a faint shiver down my arm. I closed my eyes for a second. That was a mistake. Because when I opened them again, he was watching me more closely than before. "You felt that," he said quietly. I forced a small shrug. "It's cold in here." He glanced toward the window where rain streaked down the glass. "It's not cold." My lips curved despite myself. You're very confident about that. Not confident, he replied. Just paying attention. The room fell quiet again. Somewhere in the apartment upstairs, a door closed. Footsteps crossed a floor, then faded. Life continuing normally. While inside this room, everything felt suspended. His eyes moved across my face slowly. Not rushing. Not hiding it. The intensity of it made my stomach tighten. You know what the problem is? He said. I raised an eyebrow. What? You keep waiting for something obvious to happen. I frowned slightly. And moments like this rarely announce themselves. My fingers twisted together in my lap. That sounds suspiciously like philosophy. He smiled faintly. Maybe. Then his expression softened again, more serious this time. But if this meant nothing to you? His gaze flicked down briefly, to the small space between us, before returning to my eyes. You would have moved already. I swallowed. Because he was right. I hadn't moved. Not when his knee touched mine. Not when his hand rested on my shoulder. Not when he leaned closer. The truth was sitting right there between us, silent but impossible to ignore. And he knew it. The rain suddenly grew heavier, drumming faster against the glass. For a moment we both listened to it. Then he leaned forward again. Slowly. Carefully. Close enough now that I could feel the warmth of his breath near my cheek. My body reacted before my thoughts did. A slight inhale, a subtle shift toward him. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Still nothing, he murmured. I should have said something then. I should have smiled and stood up. I should have turned my head away. Instead, I stayed. And somewhere deep down, a quiet realization settled in my chest. This moment wasn't happening because he kept moving closer. It was happening because I kept letting him. I wish I could say the moment felt reckless. Like something sudden had taken over the room. But the truth is it felt slow. Almost patient. The kind of moment that builds itself piece by piece until there's no clear line where it actually began. His face was still close to mine. Not touching. Just near enough that every small breath felt shared. I noticed details I shouldn't have been noticing. The faint shadow along his jaw, the way a strand of his hair had fallen forward slightly, the quiet focus in his eyes. It made the room feel smaller. My hands rested in my lap, fingers loosely intertwined, but I could feel the tension there. The subtle tightening each time he moved even slightly. You're very quiet, he said. His voice was softer now, almost thoughtful. I'm thinking. That's dangerous. A faint smile touched my lips. For who? For the part of you that's trying to pretend this is harmless. I let out a slow breath. You're very sure of yourself tonight. He shook his head slightly. No, he said. Then his eyes held mine in a way that made my chest tighten. I'm just sure of you. The words landed somewhere deeper than I expected. I looked away for the first time in several minutes, my gaze drifting toward the coffee table. The mug I had set down earlier was still there. A thin ring of steam barely visible above the surface. Something about that ordinary detail made the moment feel even more surreal. Because everything else in the room had changed. You shouldn't say things like that, I murmured. Why? I glanced back at him. Because it makes this feel intentional. A quiet pause settled between us. Then he asked the question I think both of us had been avoiding. Isn't it? The rain outside softened for a moment, fading to a gentle whisper against the glass. My heart beat heavier in the quiet. You're assuming a lot, I said. He studied my face carefully. Am I wrong? I opened my mouth to answer, but the words didn't come. Because in that exact moment something else happened. His hand slipped from my shoulder. Not away. Down. Slowly, carefully, his fingers brushed the side of my arm, following the line of it until his hand rested lightly around my wrist. The contact was gentle, almost cautious, but it sent a clear ripple through me. A quiet wave of warmth that traveled straight to my chest. He must have felt the slight shift in my breathing. His voice dropped even lower. You could still pull away, he said. I looked down at where his hand held my wrist. His grip wasn't tight, not even close. If I moved, he would have let go immediately. That's what made it so difficult. Because the choice was entirely mine. I lifted my eyes slowly to his. You're making this sound very serious. It is serious. The calm certainty in his voice made my stomach tighten again. Why? He didn't hesitate. Because the second before something happens, he said quietly, is usually the only honest part. My breath caught slightly. He noticed. His thumb shifted almost unconsciously against my wrist. A small movement, but enough to send another subtle shiver through my arm. The space between our faces had grown even smaller now, close enough that if I turned my head slightly, the thought alone made my pulse quicken. You're overthinking, I whispered. Am I? Yes. He watched me for a long moment. Then he leaned just a fraction closer. Not a sudden movement. Just enough to erase the last comfortable inch of space between us. My heart stumbled. The warmth of him felt immediate now. Real. And his voice, when he spoke again, was barely louder than the rain. Then why haven't you stopped me? I didn't answer him. Not because I didn't have one, but because every answer that came to mind sounded too honest. The rain had softened again outside, turning into a slow, steady whisper against the window. Somewhere down the street a car door slammed, the sound echoing faintly through the night before disappearing. Inside the room, everything felt very still. His hand was still around my wrist. Warm, careful, not holding me in place, just reminding me that I hadn't moved. I looked down at it again. His fingers weren't tense. If anything, they rested there like he was giving me the chance to decide whether they should stay. You're waiting, I said quietly. For what? For me to say something. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. I already heard your answer. I frowned slightly. I didn't say anything. Exactly. The words landed softly between us, but they carried weight. My chest rose with a slow breath. You're interpreting silence very confidently. He tilted his head a little. Silence can be very loud. My eyes drifted toward the window again. The streetlight outside blurred through the rain, casting pale reflections across the glass. For a moment I wondered what this looked like from the outside. Two people sitting close on a couch. Quiet. Still. The kind of moment that would seem completely ordinary to anyone passing by. Except it didn't feel ordinary at all. It felt like standing on the edge of something. You're thinking again, he said softly. I do that sometimes. His thumb shifted slightly against my wrist. Another small movement. Another quiet ripple through my arm. Not like this. I looked back at him. His gaze had softened now, less playful, more searching. What does that mean? I asked. It means you're not arguing anymore. That made my heart skip. Because he was right again. Earlier I had pushed back. Deflected. Turned everything into a joke. But now I was just sitting there. Feeling the warmth of his hand. Feeling how close he was. Letting the moment exist without interrupting it. You're very observant tonight, I said. I have to be. Why? His eyes held mine steadily. Because this is the kind of moment people pretend didn't happen. Something about the way he said that made my chest tighten. Maybe it shouldn't happen, I murmured. A quiet pause followed. Not tense. Just thoughtful. Then he said something that made my breath slow. Then move. I blinked. What? If you think this shouldn't happen, he continued calmly, move your hand. His grip loosened slightly as he said it, making the invitation clear. I could have pulled away easily. There was nothing stopping me. No pressure. No insistence. Just a simple choice resting in the space between us. I looked down again. My wrist still in his hand. The warmth of his skin. The quiet steadiness of his fingers. Then I looked back at him. His face hadn't moved. But his eyes were watching me carefully now. Waiting. My heart beat once. Then again. Slow. Heavy. I realized something in that silence. He wasn't the one deciding what happened next. I was. And the terrifying part was that I still hadn't moved. I think that was the moment everything became impossible to ignore. Not when he leaned closer. Not when his hand found my wrist. But when he gave me a way out. And I stayed. The room felt warmer now. Or maybe it was just my body reacting to how close he was. The lamp beside the couch hummed faintly, and the rain outside softened again into a gentle rhythm. His hand slowly released my wrist. Not because I had pulled away. Because I hadn't. His fingers slid back along my arm and rested lightly on the couch beside me, leaving a faint trace of warmth where they had been. The absence of his touch almost felt louder than the touch itself. "You see," he said quietly. I swallowed. "See what?" "That you're still here." I gave a small nervous breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "You're very focused on that detail." "It's an important detail." His voice wasn't teasing anymore. It was calm, certain. I shifted slightly on the couch, and the movement made our knees brush again. The contact was small, but the reaction inside me was immediate. That same quiet spark, that same pull that had been building for the past hour. "You're making this bigger than it is," I said. "Am I?" "Yes." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Then why is your heart beating like that?" My eyes widened slightly. "You can't hear my heart." "No," he admitted. "But I can see your breathing." I hadn't even realized it had changed. My chest rose a little faster now, each inhale shallow and careful. "That doesn't mean anything," I said. He studied me for a moment. Then he leaned a little closer again. "Not sudden. Just gradual. Careful." The space between our faces disappeared inch by inch until I could feel the warmth of him clearly now. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "It usually means something." The quiet in the room thickened again. My hands had drifted to the edge of the couch cushion, fingers gripping the fabric slightly without me noticing. I could feel his gaze moving across my face, from my eyes to my mouth then back again. It wasn't hurried. If anything, it felt patient. Like he was giving me every possible second to stop this. "You're still thinking," he murmured. "Someone has to." "Not necessarily." The rain picked up again outside, tapping gently against the glass. A cool flash of lightning flickered somewhere in the distance, briefly lighting the room before fading again. Neither of us looked away. "You're very calm," I said quietly. "Not really." That surprised me. "You look calm." "That's because I'm waiting." "For what?" His gaze held mine steadily. "For the moment you decide whether this is a mistake." My throat felt dry suddenly. "And if it is? Then nothing happens." His answer came without hesitation. "And if it's not?" This time he didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved just a fraction closer. So close now that our breaths mixed in the small space between us. The warmth of it made my pulse quicken again. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely more than a breath. "Then we'll both know you didn't stop me." My heart stumbled, because in that exact second I realized something frightening. I wasn't frozen. I wasn't confused. I wasn't trapped in the moment. I was choosing it. And my body had already made the decision my mind was still trying to avoid. The distance between us had almost disappeared. Not because of one sudden movement, because neither of us had stepped back. His face was close enough now that I could see the faint reflection of the lamp in his eyes. The warm light softened the edges of everything, the couch, the table, the quiet room around us. But the space between us felt sharper than ever. My heart beat steadily in my chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. "You're very quiet," he murmured again. His voice was barely louder than the rain. "I'm deciding," I said. His expression didn't change. "About what?" "You know what." For a moment neither of us moved. The clock on the wall ticked softly behind us. Each second sounded strangely loud in the silence. Then he said something unexpected. "You don't have to explain anything." I frowned slightly. "That's convenient." "It's honest." His gaze stayed locked on mine. "Some moments aren't about explanations." "Then what are they about?" He didn't hesitate. "Truth." The word hung in the air. Simple. Uncomfortable. My fingers tightened slightly against the couch cushion again. "Truth is complicated," I said. "Only when we avoid it." A faint breath left my chest. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy." For the first time that night, his voice carried a trace of something deeper. Not confidence but restraint. "That's why most people stop themselves before they reach this part." I felt that sentence settle somewhere in my chest. Because he was right. Most people would have stepped away already. Most people wouldn't still be sitting here, letting the moment stretch thinner and thinner. "You think you know what I'm going to do," I said. "No." "Then why are you so calm?" He looked at me for a long second. Then his eyes softened slightly. Because I'm not the one deciding. The words landed gently, but they carried weight. And he was right again. Every step of this moment had happened because I allowed it. Not forced. Not rushed. Allowed. The realization made my chest tighten in a strange way. Part fear. Part something warmer. You're dangerous, I whispered. A faint smile touched his lips. Only if you keep staying. The rain grew heavier again outside, tapping steadily against the glass. A flash of distant thunder rolled somewhere far across the sky. Inside the room the air felt almost still. Then something shifted. Not dramatically, just a small movement. My body leaned forward. Barely. A subtle change in posture that shortened the distance between us even more. His eyes noticed immediately. The warmth between our faces deepened. You see, he said quietly. I didn't answer. Because at that point the truth was impossible to hide. My gaze dropped for half a second. To his mouth. Then back to his eyes. His breath slowed. You could still stop me, he murmured. The words floated between us like a final door left open. I knew what he meant. All it would take was a single movement. A turn of my head. A step back. A laugh. But my body didn't do any of those things. Instead I stayed exactly where I was. Close enough now that the warmth of his breath brushed softly against my lips. And in that quiet suspended second, he leaned in. Slowly. Carefully. And I didn't say stop. But here's the part that still keeps me awake some nights. He never actually kissed me. Not really. That's what makes the memory so sharp. He leaned in slowly, the way someone does when they're giving the moment every chance to change its mind. I could feel his breath now, warm and unsteady against my lips. My heart was beating so loudly I was certain he could hear it. Another inch. That was all it would have taken. The rain outside had grown heavier again, tapping insistently against the window like the night itself was leaning closer to listen. My body stayed still. My eyes were still on his. And for a second that felt strangely endless, the world seemed to narrow down to one small space between us. Then something changed. Not in the room. In him. His eyes searched my face again, slower this time, more carefully than before. Like he was looking for something deeper than permission. My breathing caught slightly. Say it, he whispered. The words were barely sound. Say what? I murmured. If you want this. The sentence hung there. Simple. Direct. Suddenly the moment felt different. Before it had been tension. Curiosity. The quiet pull of something neither of us was naming. But now it was choice. Real choice. And something about that made the air in my chest tighten. Because the truth was right there, ready to be spoken. But the truth carried weight. The kind that doesn't disappear after the moment ends. My gaze dropped briefly between us. Then I looked back at him. You're unfair, I said softly. Why? Because you already know. His expression didn't change. I want to hear it. Another long second passed. The rain kept falling. The clock ticked. My heart kept reminding me how close we were. Then I did something I hadn't done all night. I leaned back. Not suddenly. Just enough to let a small breath of space return between us. His hand dropped slowly to the couch beside him. He didn't try to follow. He just watched me. And for the first time that evening there was something almost gentle in his eyes. See, I said quietly. He tilted his head slightly. See what? That second before something happens. I let out a slow breath. Is sometimes the only moment where you can still decide who you are. The room felt calmer now. Not empty. Just different. He sat back against the couch, running a hand through his hair as he exhaled softly. You were right, he said after a moment. About what? That it was serious. A faint smile tugged at my lips, though my chest still felt strangely tight. We didn't talk about it after that. Not really. Eventually the rain slowed. Eventually the night ended. But sometimes when I think about it now I realize something strange. People always talk about the moment two people finally kiss. But the moment that changes you the most is the second right before it. The second when you realize you could say stop. And understand exactly why you didn't.